Hey there, Jamie with Brazelton Realty here. Are you thinking about buying new construction? Well, before you do, I have 5 things I think you should consider when you consider new construction versus an already built house. So keep watching. So you're in the market for a new house and you're considering new construction. Now, I want to speak into that just a little bit. But before I do, let me step back and say the new construction that I'm talking about is going to be the semi-custom, not the full custom, the semi-custom, so the DR Hortons, the Horizon Views and the Bestlers and those type, where you have a subdivision and they have certain lots and they're just building out those lots as they go about. That's the kind of construction that I'm going to be talking about here today. And I have some things I think you need to consider that most people don't consider when they're looking at purchasing. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is probably, to me, one of the more important aspects of buying a property, because I tend to be more financially minded, is when you're buying new construction, you're usually, not always, but usually going to get less for your money. It's going to be more expensive, right? This is a house that has never been lived in before, and you're making modifications for it to fit who you are and your needs. So it just stands to reason that it is going to be more expensive. Now, builders try as hard as they can to push that price point down, but no matter how hard they try, they're up against some very difficult things this day and age. Lumber prices have gone up, lot prices are very expensive, and water prices are extremely expensive. So they have to sell that property for more money in order for them to be profitable. Now, here's some ways in which they try to lower those costs to make it more affordable for people that you need to be aware of. First, there's some things that they don't provide in almost any properties. One is a fridge, right? Now, that's not hugely expensive, a couple $1,000s, but it starts to add up because you also don't have any window treatments. There's a lot of other decor that normally gets left with property that doesn't get left with a new build. The other big ticket items could be sometimes they don't have AC with it. Now, here in northern Colorado, it's not a necessity to have air conditioning. However, I would want it. So I would have that added. A lot of times they don't do any landscaping in the backyard. They'll do the front yard because most of these are in HOAs and they want them to look nice. But the backyard, a lot of times they won't do landscaping, which also includes probably a fence. And a lot of times they have regulations on what kind of fence you can put in, and they'll require that fence in a certain time period. So those are things you just need to keep in the back of your mind when you're looking at these properties, because those are going to be costs that you're going to have to incur that you wouldn't if it was already built. Now, the second thing that you need to consider is the process normally takes quite a bit longer. Now, this isn't always the case. Sometimes you have builders that do spec homes or speculation homes where they're building that house out before they have a contract on it. Or sometimes they have a contract on a house that's being built and then the contract falls apart at the last minute, so they have to get it under contract with somebody else. And in those cases, you can speed the process up, but the sacrifice you have is you're also not involved in picking out some of the additions and making some of the choices along the build process. So if you're going to build from the ground and pick out your lot, pick out your model, and pick out all the additions and everything that you can customize within that house, it's going to take quite a while. Usually right now, 6 months is kind of the sweet spot that it'll take for you to build. Now, it may not be a problem for some people, but that is a downside to building a new house. Now, the other downside to building new construction is the timeline is so far out there, and the builder always wants to make sure that you're going to be good for it. So if you have a house already, they're going to require that house to be listed significantly before the building due date is going to be completed. Now, the hard part with that is sometimes you can get a post-closing occupancy agreement. So you list your house, it gets under contract, and sometimes that contract will take a while, and then you'll sell the property and then you can live in it for an additional a couple months at most probably. You really don't want to count on that though, because a lot of times when you list your house, you're up against buyers who need a place to live. They need to move in somewhere. So I wouldn't count on that. A lot of times the people I've sold new construction to, they have to go find a place to either rent or go live with some friends or family in the area until their property is completed. Now, you may not own a house now, you may just be renting, but the same thing can happen to you as a renter. Let's say you sign up for another 6-month lease, but the building completion date gets pushed out another couple months after that. You're going to have to go on a month-to-month lease. Some landlords aren't going to be willing to work with you on that. So you have to keep those things in mind because it is new construction. There's a lot of variables, and almost inevitably those dates are going to change from the time you start to the time it gets completed. Now, the fourth thing that I think you need to consider when you're looking at new construction like this is almost inevitably it is going to cost more than what you really want to pay for. Now, when you go into buying a house that's already built, right, you don't have a lot of options within that property. You either buy it or you don't buy it. And then if you decide to buy it, you can adjust that price to whatever offer seems reasonable to you. And for the most part, you're going to know how much it's going to cost. When you're building new construction, you go in at that base price and then you do some add-ons and some additions and some changes right away. But over the long term, you're always going to be making some more changes, making some more additions, and almost without exception, in my experience, I have seen people pay more from a bottom line perspective than they would have if they would have just bought a house that was already built. Now, the fifth reason why I think you should consider buying something that's already built is when you're going into a new neighborhood, that neighborhood by definition is new, right? It's less mature. So the trees are going to be less mature. The sidewalks and everything is going to be just less mature and just getting established. Now, depending on where that house is in the life cycle of that subdivision will depend on how much more maturity they're going to have to bring. Some neighborhoods, they're just getting finished with it, and so that neighborhood is fairly mature already. The trees still aren't going to be big and the like, but for the most part, most of the construction piece is done. But usually when people go into a subdivision, they're going to have to deal with a certain amount of construction of other houses around them. And that's just part of building a new construction. You're going to have to wait a while before that neighborhood really matures and gets established and becomes a really, really nice place to live. Now, I hope this was helpful to you. I hope this gave you some things to consider. There's a lot of new construction here in Colorado, in the Front Range in northern Colorado right now. There's a lot of new builders that are just popping up and a lot of different subdivisions. So I'm going to compile a list of all the different new subdivisions that are going to be available, and I'm going to put it in a link in the description below. So if you are interested, even after everything I've said, and you want to entertain new construction, here's a list of some new construction builders that you want to consider. All right, thanks for watching. Are you considering buying a new house? Well, on this channel, we talk about all things real estate related here in northern Colorado. So if this is something that's interesting to you, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification to be notified next time I post a video.